Hello, everybody. Welcome. I'm Alan IHOLDSHIFT down to Frio.
I'm Austin Visions Neil.
This is the Defuse. Austin, I have to start this show off in a very unorthodox way.
Okay, hit me.
I upload these to YouTube, put them onto all of our podcast providers.
Sure.
I got called out in such a very abusive way the other day. This is the comment. I'm not going to say the guy's name because it's not appropriate. Great pod, but you need the timestamps and get rid of the dumbass intro shift. Just introduce your co-host, you effing melt. I think I need to do that. So with that in mind, that's Austin. I'm Shift. We're going to jump right on into First Blood. That's all you guys get. That's the only warm-up you have for this episode.
Yeah.
First Blood.
It's abusive. It was like,
Yeah.
it was like 2 o'clock in the morning when that comment came. I was like in bed, like I got the notification on my phone, and normally like at that hour, like I already have it on Do Not Disturb, and I'm just like looking through whatever, like Twitter or something. But I had not had my phone on Do Not Disturb. I was like sleeping. I think I had like Schitt's Creek up on Netflix on my laptop, and I get the notification. I pause it to go look at the notification for some reason, and I laughed so hard. I literally laughed myself awake. It was so good. We're gonna jump straight on in talking First Blood, all the hottest topics in the CDL. First topic up. I mean, how do we not talk a lot about what's been going on with all of the rookies? And we'll say this much. There was that little graphic that was put on stream. I don't think this was intentional. I think it was supposed to be framed over. Here are the 4 most recent players to be jumping into the league this year from challengers. That was neglecting what we've seen from Neptune, what we've seen from Diamond Con, things of that nature. So
Sure.
how about the fact that rookies are literally dominating the CDL conversation so far in the year?
I love it, Alan. I mean, this is what we've been preaching. This is what we say about challenges, right? There's some players that deserve to be, on these CDL teams. And the fact that we're finally getting it, and these CDL teams are realizing, like, hey, wait, we should probably look at some of the younger talent to see if maybe this will kind of fix some of the problems that we're currently having our roster. We learned that last year with Florida. We're learning it this year again. Minnesota, they looked like a totally different team.
Totally
and Standy did have a really good performance. Don't get me wrong. He had a 1.5, I think it was, shift, where he just, he took over. And it's not easy to go into that against Optic Chicago and put on that kind of a performance as well. So I think the fact that we're seeing some of these young guns already show what they're capable of doing this early, like first series, is just mind-blowing because the sky's the limit.
Yeah, it's the Standy conversation point, I think, really set it over the edge. Like that was boiling point for sure. Because Diamond Con comes in, impresses. Well, first and foremost, Neptune kind of came in during the kickoff week and impressed.
That's right.
And then we saw Diamond Con. He obviously blew expectations out of the water when it comes to what we kind of thought about New York in the early points. Parasite Zed for Paris, or not for Paris, pardon me, for London. Again, great performances on their initial debuts. Then Paul comes into the mix, blows expectations out of the water. Insight sets a record, his first search and destroy the CDL. And then Standy helps one of the worst teams in the league beat one of the best teams in the league, and it was in 3-0 fashion with 1.5 KD. That's unreal and unheard of. But the thing about it is, this is not a new conversation.
No.
Like, this happened last year. There were, obviously for World War II, it's a little bit different simply because of the fact that there were teams that were still able to get into the Pro League through qualifying, during the different stages. But you can even argue that there were teams during that calendar year that did something similar.
It's just like so mind-blowing. And it's funny because Clayster put out a tweet. He's like, you guys really been sleeping on this. Like, I'm glad you're finally catching up and realizing that looking towards younger talent, especially stacked with veteran talent, like is one of the keys to success. And if you couldn't kind of pick that apart from Clayster's last 2 years in 5v5, doing it with Simp and Abizi, and then turning around doing it with Ilya and Shotzi, well, then you're not looking in the right places. Let's just be honest. So it really is nice to see. I think that 1, players are getting a chance, and 2, they're actually shining and coming to life, which is so difficult to do. And maybe it has to do with the fact that we are in an online environment where, before there was a lot more emphasis on a player being brought into LAN. It's like, is he going to show up? Can he do it? Knowing that there is a crowd behind him, that the players are right next to them, sometimes yelling at them. So maybe a different environment. And this could honestly be the benefit of being a rookie right now in 2020, 2021, is the fact that you get all these early reps in, you get this good, and then you go to LAN and you already kind of have a lot of experience under your belt. So it really, I think, is benefiting these rookies that are coming in and putting on this kind of performance.
I think there's a conversation, maybe just honestly a question, because all the players that we've just mentioned, they're rookies to the CDL, but they aren't rookies to Call of Duty. Like outside of
Sure.
Neptune, that's the only one that's a rookie to Call of Duty. So like in that, I mean that players like DC and Parasite and Paul, and now especially looking at what we just saw from Standy, they've all played on LAN environment tournaments before when it comes to playing in the open brackets and things of that in the past. Maybe not Standy. I don't know if he played at Minnesota launch weekend. I would have figured that he
He
probably
wouldn't have
did.
been. Did he turn 18? I'm
I
figuring
don't
out when he turned
remember.
18 because it was sometime last year. I just don't know if it was at the beginning of the year or not.
I could look
But
this
yeah,
up.
I'm not sure if he was there or not.
But
It
regardless
would be interesting
of
to see,
that,
right?
yeah, I think that would be he did. He plays top 16 at Minnesota, and he also
Okay,
plays
okay.
third at Atlanta. So there is something to be said about the fact that they already have some LAN experience in. So I guess like my final question on this, do you think that just the fact that Challengers now has a spotlight is why we're getting so many more rookies being brought up in the last 2 years? Or is it just simple fact the matter of teams need to make changes and they're doing their proper scouting? Because let's be honest, almost every single person that's been brought up from Challengers in the last 2 years has had a major impact on the teams that they've been brought into.
Yeah, I think it's definitely because of the spotlight on challengers. I mean, it's just so easy to kind of see, all right, these are the top 8 teams that we currently have through North America is where you're primarily looking. Unfortunately, EU not really a topic for as far as a talking point, but
Sure.
I think that you look and you figure out players' positions and then you watch that player individually play map to map, series to series, and you can kind of get a feel for would they be the right fit? Would they be worth at least trying, right? Like throwing them into some scrims. I think that you kind of get a good idea there, but I would say absolutely that challenge has been putting a pretty big spotlight on some of these people because we've also been talking about them when we're on these challenger streams as well as everyone else on that broadcast team, so that certainly helps as well.
Yeah, and it's a conversation point that I think there's a lot of factors that would go into it. And because you could even argue the fact that like Standy has not had the best challengers year by results, when it comes down
By
to
results,
the teams he's
yeah.
played on. So, I don't know. It's an interesting conversation point. That does bring us into the next conversation point, which is the fact that both Minnesota and London have started to see new life since the roster changes. Now, obviously, I would say the argument is that Minnesota has had the most stark difference from what they were able to do
Yeah.
before versus now, simply because of the fact that they played up against Chicago, caught them maybe off guard or a little bit flat, whatever you have. It's still a 3-0, and it was a pretty convincing 3-0.
It was.
But beyond that, it's not even the fact that it's just Standy who was able to have an impact on the match. All
That's
4
right.
players got better because of the swaps that have come through, whether it's just because of Standy coming into the mix or specifically because Priesta is now running that second AR. He looked like the Priesta that we expected to see at the beginning of the year.
He really did. And this is what we talked about because I think everyone from the scene was looking at Priesta and was like, yeah, man, he's going to be running the show on this
Has
team.
to.
Like, sure, you got lots of other players that, have a lot of accolades, but it feels like Priesta is the one that's going to be carrying this squad and kind of leading it. And that's not what happened. Everyone's like, what's going on here? Like this isn't the Priesta we saw from last year. Like, was this the same Priesta that was on Atlanta FaZe? It doesn't feel like it. And now that we see him with this AR where he feels a lot more comfortable, and I think more importantly, Attach has someone that can play just at his speed and kind of plays very similar to him. I think now it just kind of connects all the dots, right? Like it really was the last missing piece of the puzzle to kind of fit things together and make it work. And is it ever working? Now, sure, we got a small sample size, but I think with the team that we had for as far as a sample, I mean, it's a pretty good one to take away.
It's such a stark difference. I mean, I'm going to try to formulate some of the statistics without having them ready to go offhand. But taking a look at Minnesota before before yesterday when they played up against Chicago, I mean, they were by far the worst hardpoint team in the game. Without question, their average was not anywhere near respectable. I mean, dead last, losing on an average of about 24 points. Actually, before that was like 40 points a game. And then you come out and you 100-point Club Optic Chicago, one of the best respawn teams in the game.
Yep.
That says a lot. I mean, this is a team that I think we were not expecting to see these differences be pulled immediately. I mean, hell, we talked about it on Wednesday that Minnesota would feel fortunate to walk away with maybe 3 map wins over the course of this week since they play Chicago and Dallas. They've already met that mark and come away with a 3-0 win versus a team that arguably I think we were kind of maybe thinking would be better than where Dallas currently is positioned based off some shaky results lately. I don't know. It's been really interesting to see. But on the other foot, we have to make sure we leave time for London because Paul, incredible, but it's not just Paul. Dylan has been lighting things up. Zed has been playing super consistent. I would argue more consistently in the CDL than what he was even doing during stage 1 of Challengers Elite.
Yeah, 100%. I actually think the difference is that it's confidence now. Like, I'm also pretty sure that PaulEhx has probably helped a lot of these guys for as far as, figuring out the philosophy and how they want to approach the game and play the game. Because before when we were watching London, it felt like a lot of the times they weren't on the same page or there was a miscoordination, even though we had, some pop-off plays here and there and there was some highs. But overall, it feels like they really are on the same page now. And there's a lot of trust in what PaulEhx is bringing towards the squad with that AR. I mean, he's playing really, really well, really consistent, which is obviously helping. But I think that you have other benefits now of Zed and Dylan who are starting to play off of each other. And you can see Dylan also waiting a lot more, where it feels like these things are starting to be talked about, and now they believe and trust in each other, where they know all right, we can win as a team. We don't have to just rely on Dylan going off for 6 kills in a row to be able to break a point or something like this. So I think a lot more things are coming together, and London have looked a lot more consistent throughout just about every game mode, which is something that we didn't exactly or couldn't exactly say going in throughout stage 1.
I mean, since the stage has turned, they've only lost a single map. They only lost the one map today versus LA Thieves, and it was a hard point that they should have won.
Oh, right.
Yeah, it was the checkmate hard point that they were up 240 to 180. So with that in mind, I mean, this is a team coming into the split that had only won a single search and destroy. Now they've won 2, both of them dominatingly. And beyond that, they've clutched up in a couple of really close hard points. And the controls has been kind of consistent for them. I mean, especially the 3-0 they had today. I mean, that thing was, lightning fast control. I was in the car on the way home. I was like, I'm just gonna run and do an errand real quick. And
map's over, Alan.
Map was over. I was trying to catch it on my phone, just listening to the audio in my car, and it was already over. So I don't know. I think that we still have a lot to learn about both of these teams, but as far as being able to get an immediate turn that was required, I mean, they found that and then some. This is miraculous, I would say. I would say this is miraculous. I mean, literally, one of my fill-in-the-blanks from Minnesota was that they need Jesus to find the turnaround to the season. They may have just found him.
Standy is Jesus.
You've heard it here first. That's the official capacity of what we're talking about. That brings us into something a little bit off the radar of what we normally would talk about. Over the last week, there have been a number of kind of rumor mill leaks about what's going to be happening with the fall release of Call of Duty, including that it will be going back to World War II, and it should be something listed as Vanguard. It could be a filler name, could be an actual subtitle to it, but it's going to be World War II based. There's been instances and rumors that it's going to extend beyond the normal timeline of World War II, so maybe it'll be like a historical fiction. I thought initially when I thought World War II, I thought it was just going to be the same time frame, but move it out of European theater and go to Pacific theater.
Right.
And now we're kind of in a world where we don't really know for sure, outside of the fact that it's probably pretty likely, based on how reliant the leakers have been in the last couple of years, that it will be a World War II-esque game. What are your initial thoughts on it?
I'm happy for it. I mean, I know World War II is kind of mixed feelings for the community, I think, overall, just based off when the game had came in. It was the first game we got after the jetpack era, but I think there was a lot of good takeaways. First off, competitive was really fun to watch when you were a spectator or a caster in that era. 2, I feel like the flow of it was actually perfect. It's when we had 4v4. I thought the guns were really good. The time to kill was perfect, in my opinion. The only takeaways I think that were negatives is that the game was a little bit too nade spammy, right? There was no trophy system, so getting people off the hill was almost too easy, it felt like, and maybe the maps were a little bit bland, and we didn't have maybe the best map pool, right? I feel like those are the only true negatives, but a lot of people went back to play World War II during this offseason. That was one of the games to play, and it is a very fun competitive game, so I'm actually very happy to see that we will get a game that's likely going to be similar to it.
I feel like a lot of the negative connotation assimilated to World War II was simply because the game took a long time to really get to where it needed to be. The game, I think, by the end of the year was what people were hoping for by the beginning of the year. Good boots on the ground, good weapon balancing. There were some questions, like you mentioned, when it comes to playing around the utility and stuff like that. In my mind, I'm actually super, super pumped for this, because I'm thinking about this existentially beyond just where I feel like a lot of our listeners would, where it's competitive Call of Duty, that's it. Now, the thing that I'm curious about is what is going to actually happen with Warzone in conjunction with World War II. Can you actually keep Warzone simultaneously running with the same weapons and stories that you're getting out of the current competitive title, or multiplayer title, I guess we should say. Because do we really think that people are going to be okay after 2 years of ecosystem in Warzone of playing with XM4s and Pelingtons and FFARs and AUGs, that they're going to want to go to PPSHs and STGs and things that don't have the ability to get the same kind of weapon attachments immersion-wise onto what we currently know to be the Warzone meta? I think this is going to be great for the title because it's going to be the first separation between Warzone as its own thing, and then we can get back to actually building a competitive multiplayer for Call of Duty. Because let's be honest, all of the attachments and stuff that we have for Modern Warfare and Cold War is built for Warzone first.
We got into a long combo the other night about that, and that's where the problem, starts to bleed into competitive, where we need something stable game to game for competitive, especially if we're franchising. And if we're going to open up franchise spots, like, how are teams going to come in confidently, or rather organizations, knowing that, well, this is kind of, first it's Warzone, second it's multiplayer, third it's competitive. So you have to kind of, really rethink, all right, how are we going to approach this game? And I really do agree with you. I hope that this is the game that kind of starts to step away almost from building the game with the current one that we have at hand, and can actually focus more on building multiplayer and competitive, so that we aren't getting changes where we're this far in towards the game, we still don't even have smokes. And if we don't have smokes, you don't have snipers, right? Like, that's in a way that's kind of unacceptable, like, in my eyes. So I think that this is really hopefully a step in the right direction for, as far as Sledgehammer maybe putting their foot down and actually giving us a game that is going to be competitive ready, a few weeks in rather than a few months in.
Yeah, I think the big question though is we have to remember that Sledgehammer, whether this was supposed to be the title for this year, or whatever the back behind the doors, situation was when it came to developing 2020's COD release, are they going to be ready for this release? Like, if the game was in such an unplayable state a year ago, have they been able to come around and correct all of those things to make sure it's going to be good off launch? Because I would hate to see the multiplayer be dragged into a very dark place because the game on launch is not ready. Now, I'll say this much. I am still not finding enjoyment by going through and playing multiplayer right now in Cold War, because there's just not a lot to play for. Honestly, the reason that I signed on to play Cold War pubs right now is based on what's in the current playlist. Like, League play, there's really not a lot of a reason to play. It's not at all affiliated with what we're seeing in the CDL. Like, the rule sets are so vastly different. There's no rank to play for. I don't know. I'm hoping that this title, regardless of what people think about the theater of it and the arena of it, I'm hoping that this will start to be the bridgeway between, all right, Warzone is now safe, it's established, let it be what it is. Let's now take multiplayer back to what we want to take it to, because that would be, I think, a really cool idea to do. But though, brings us to our next segment. It's going to be time for a little bit of chalk or talk. With Chalk or Talk today, a lot of it actually goes now back into the CDL conversation pool. I know we usually use First Blood to talk about some of the more dramatic topics, if you want to call it that. But this is usually a segment that we use to really kind of dig into the recent results. And we've talked a lot about London already. It feels appropriate to kind of talk about London again with the statement of, with London's recent change, London will finish top 6 at the Stage 2 Major. Chalking or talking it?
I think I'm going to chalk this. I'm going to chalk this down. I think that London has been on the up and up. I think that they're in this honeymoon phase, but we've seen a lot of honeymoon phases pan out, throughout history, whether that's good or bad. It feels like this could come to an end once we get maybe in towards the next stage, or by the end of this one. Of course, I don't think they're going to make top 6. I think they're top 8 for sure. And they might be able to beat out a lot of these other teams that are kind of like hit or miss right now and not exactly consistent. And PaulEhx is a great upgrade, but it doesn't exactly solve everything here for me just yet for the squad, even though I think that they've been on a nice little hot streak, only dropping a map throughout the first 2 series. But I think as we get longer and longer in towards the rest of it, we're going to see teams start to kind of figure them out and maybe shut these guys down.
You're not going to believe that I'm saying this. I think you saw it. I'm sharing my screen to you. I already had you listed as talk. I thought for sure you were going to talk it. I actually am going to talk this. And this is kind of like a gut check reaction. When we were initially putting together the run of show, I was going to chalk this. But I started to think about it. Wait a second. London's 2-0. They still have to play up against Toronto. They still maybe could beat New York. Regardless, if they just lose to New York and Atlanta, they're going to be in the winners bracket to start things off. So the chances of them getting maybe through their first winners bracket game versus a team that finishes top 3 in Group B, which could be a team like Seattle. They could make it already into the winners semifinals. Even if they lose, I think there are teams in the other group that they could beat. I actually think this is very possible. I'm going to talk that London, if they keep playing the way they're playing, they could finish top 6. What a turnaround for me. Literally a week ago, I was like, there's no saving this team. Literally
no way.
Wednesday, I was
It's
like,
over.
they're still going to have to make changes. So I don't know. We're in that weird stage right now. But I think that with the placements and with the teams they have available still that they play up against, I think it's actually pretty possible that they can finish top 6.
We'll find out, Alan.
We'll find out. A lot of interesting topic of conversation regarding the Optic loss, specifically around Sender. Tons of blame about how he didn't get the team prepared or he's not doing anything, blah, 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 blah. Do you feel that blaming Sender is justified? Do you think that that's the conversation point?
No, I don't think it is. I'm gonna chalk this, and I think the reason I'm gonna chalk this is because it seems like Optic, whenever they're playing squads that maybe aren't as high tiered, like aren't necessarily like your Dallases, your Atlanta FaZe, I don't think they come game ready. It almost feels like, right? Like there's never a world where Optic should be 100-point club by a team that just went through a roster swap, just went through a bunch of role changes and, fell out that flat. Like didn't even take a map. Like that doesn't feel like the Optic gaming that we just saw on the last stage at the major, right? So I think I'm going to chalk this. Everything coming at Sender, he even vocally came out and said, listen, our practice is going great. If that doesn't reflect in towards, our CDL games, that's not necessarily my fault. We're winning. I'm doing what we need to do to make sure that we're prepared. It's just we're coming out flat.
Yeah, that's, I feel there's been that kind of assumption or insinuation in prior matchups for Optic that they just don't take some of the league play matches in regular season seriously.
Yeah,
that's kind of how it felt. I mean, you could definitely just feel the nonverbal communication was just electric by watching the London cams, and Chicago just was kind of there. Not saying that they're phoning in. It's not what I want to kind of lend anyone to believe, but to sit there and go out as the Optic community and come out and start blaming Sender, say that he needs to get fired and Tupac needs to get brought back in, that's ridiculous. It's absolutely ridiculous. I think we all know, the people that are close to around the inner circle, know that what Sender is doing is everything he should be doing, and coming out flat just happens for good teams every now and again. And then even beyond that, I just don't think you can chalk up the entire match to Optic coming out flat. I think London came out and looked absolutely incredible, or Minnesota, pardon me, came out and looking incredible. I don't know why I kept saying London. That's unreal, and I don't think you can just look at that and say it's Sender's fault. That's ridiculous. I couldn't believe my eyes on the TL yesterday.
It's the Optic fans, Alan. They gotta blame someone, dude.
I guess so.
It's not their fault.
I guess so. Well, speaking about putting some blame out there, good segue. Thank you very much for that one, Austin. How about problems in the Gorillas camp with their loss today? Are you going to go ahead and talk or chalk the fact that the Gorillas need to make a change?
I'm going to talk the fact they need to make a change, man. And if they don't make one soon, there's not going to be maybe too many top tier AMs that are CDL ready that they're going to be able to get. Right. I think that's really the big factor right now. We saw that last year, like I touched on in a point earlier, that Florida picked up a lot of the great AMs that I think, they really needed to try and get as fast as possible. That's now happening again this year. Right around this time, we're seeing a lot of these CDL players that are ready to go are being picked up. And if they don't jump on the fact soon, then I'm going to be really worried because things are just not clicking here for them. We saw them make a bit of a resurgence last stage, but it didn't feel like, at least to me, I think you had, some mixed feelings compared to my opinion, but I didn't feel like this squad was going to maybe be able to actually make a dent and do something. And I feel like that's the exact same situation they're in now. You have some highs, you have some lows, but overall, there's not enough consistency for me to say this is going to be a top squad.
I'm going to chalk this, and it's scary because they have lost, was that 3, 4, 7 straight respawns between hardpoint and control. That statistic alone is scary.
Yikes.
But you look at how the losses fared, none of them were bad losses, except for the 0-3 loss to New York at the end of the stage 1 run that they were putting together. That was the only loss that in my mind that I thought was a bad loss. In my mind, I think this is still a team that can fix things. I still think there are major signs of life overall. And I think that I just don't know who you would drop, I think is the other thing. Who are you subbing out
I think Assault
to bring in? You're thinking Assault. See, I think Assault played pretty well today.
What about Assault for a Methods?
I don't know if that's going to fix any problems. I feel like that's a 1-for-1. I don't look downly on anybody on that roster right now in LA. I think the one big question mark is like, can Silly actively run that second AR to the success of other players that are out there? But there have been moments where he's proved that yes, he can. And I would be interested to see him kind of adapt that flak jacket tack mask build for the QBZ, take the optic off it, and try to get a little bit more oppressive and aggressive with it. I think that's a possibility where maybe some of those mistimings that LIG have put together can be either reinforced or fixed overall because you've got an extra AR that can get involved a little bit more often. So I don't know. I think this is still a team that could fix things up, and I still have faith that they're going to do just fine through stage 2. Might be crazy.
We will see, Alan. I don't know.
That brings us. Hey, we haven't done this in a while, but it's
been
time.
a bit.
It's time for some overextended. Typically speaking, when we run this segment, it's off of a result from the CDL or challengers, and we just like way overreact to it. Like, oh my God, London's 2-0. They're going to win CDL championships. That would be an example. The conversation points we have today are actually outside of the normal results and more focused on some of the surrounding kind of atmosphere of Call of Duty. Starting with yours, a very interesting topic you picked for today.
I did. So I'm just going to tell you guys to bear with me, listen through it, before you react, because I know this could sound blasted. But right now, Modern Warfare last year is more exciting than Cold War at its current state. And this is why. We don't have smokes in the rotation. We don't have snipers in the rotation. So if you're watching Search and Destroy right now, it feels like it's really underwhelming and pretty boring overall, right? I mean, you're either going to see like aggressive hits matched with, an aggressive defensive hit, or you're going to see slow pushes towards a bomb site. There's some bomb sites you can't even hit in the game still. So we're at this point in time where it's like stalemate still 30 seconds. It's like, oh, well, guys, we got to do something on the attack here. Let's make a move. So I'm a little bit worried for as far as the game state right now, because I think as we get another month in or month 2 in, I think a lot of people are going to start viewing it the same way I do and realize that things are getting a little bogged down. Things are feeling really, really boring at the moment. And if you go back and watch last year, sure, the game was not fun to play, but Modern Warfare was fun to watch, in my opinion. And I did like casting it because it was super fast-paced, a lot of action. I'm not getting that so much in Cold War right now, and it feels like things do feel a little bland.
The platform that I think immediately makes this conversation shaky, I'm going to say one word. You know what word I'm going to say?
I don't.
Domination.
That's fair, right? I think Dom was pretty boring. But I just feel like when I'm watching, I'm not like thrilled. Like I'm not like, oh, that was a cool play. Oh, that was a sick play. You know what I mean? But like
sure.
something's missing, I think, right now. And I don't know if it's the dynamic of the fact that because there's no smokes in play, things are they're too predictable. Especially when we're watching the game so much. Like things are predictable. I can like see things unfolding before they unfold because I know what's going to happen. A smoke, not saying that just throws creativity in there and it's like, oh, we don't know what's going to happen. It's chaos. But like at least it creates a different dynamic, right? And I think that's what's missing right now.
It's interesting because last year Search and Destroy, I think, was one of the more fun Search and Destroy games to watch in a long time when it comes to what we had. But I think that even the Search and Destroy without smokes and snipers in this game, if it's not 3-dimensional, it's like 2-dimensional. There are still some plays that can happen. I mean, you have to take Garrison out of the conversation pool now, obviously, and I still think Checkmate needs to be replaced in some form, but I don't know. It's an interesting point. I won't necessarily disagree with you because there are some instances in Cold War where I'm just like sitting there, I'm just like when you see a checkmate control and everyone's just like got the most impressive defense in the world.
Wait till round 5.
Yeah, it's to see what happens. Who gets round 5? That's like the most exciting part sometimes. I don't know. It's an interesting conversation point. I'm going to take this next segment here because there was a recent blow up on social media regarding the Minnesota Rocker in version 1 social media job that was posted. Now, if you missed this, what you missed essentially was a job was posted looking for 2 to 4 social media interns, full-time position, 40 hours a week. And the problem with the post was the fact that it laid out a bunch of job requirements and a bunch of scheduling things that if you were to consider that as the individual, There's no way I could be going and moving my life to Minnesota and working full time, working over the weekend, working holidays, sometimes working overnight while posting 15 content pieces between two different. It was a lot. It felt like a lot. But the job requirements, when you really sat down and looked at it, was from the perspective of a total team. For those that were complaining about $12 an hour not being enough, I challenge you to rethink when you first started getting into esports. It was as recent as last year as a 31-year-old that I was sitting up in my bedroom here casting tournaments for 15 hours for free. You're telling me I've got a chance to work alongside Gary V, Midnight, Brett Diamond, and the rest of that Minnesota Rocker team that are all incredible people, by the way. I get to do that for pay and potential of a full-time job, or at worst, a letter of recommendation from Gary V? Are you kidding me? How in the world do you think that opportunity is not worth going? The counter argument, oh, well, how are you supposed to be expected to move your life to Minnesota on $12 an hour? Get a roommate! Are you kidding me? That is such an incredible opportunity. Anyone who sits there and says that this is not okay for our industry, I think is just so off base. Get your qualifications, get your experience, you're getting paid, and you get the chance to pick the brain of some of the best in esports. That is a loose phrase to say generally, but I specifically mean it. Those are some of the best people in esports. I would do that tomorrow for free if I thought that my career was more invested by making that choice. It's ridiculous. I was completely fuming last night about it.
I'm gonna let you cool off now, Al, because I'm right with you. I'm right with you, man. I think it's just like a lack of perspective, and it's just, I think, really wild and interesting to see, especially from the casting community. Like, how else were you supposed to get into casting? Like, do you think you were coming in with day rates right away? Hell no. Like, I think I did it for at least 8 months for free, and I was doing it about 4 or 5 days a week while balancing, a job as well as school. And I was like, listen, like, if this is what you want to do, then that's like all the fuel you need behind it to be able to put the extra effort in. And if you're not making enough money, $12 an hour, well, think of the people that have 3 jobs while going to school or something like this. You know what I mean? So like, I'm right with you. I'm right with you. I think that it's pretty blasted that people were losing their mind with the opportunities that come with it and what it leads to, like what that position leads to in turn.
Unreal.
You know,
I could not believe it. And I do understand that it is a venture-backed company. Could they possibly afford more money for that position? What would have been the total? 15 an hour? Would that have been fine? Maybe.
Yeah. What is it?
Like what is the total that I think people are looking for? And even still, like $15 an hour in the scheme of like what the normal worker makes at a venture-backed company is not a lot. I am at a loss for all of the hate that Minnesota and Version 1 team got, because I think the opportunity is literally, people work for free every single day of the week hoping for a chance like that. So I thought it was completely out of this world. That brings us into our final segment of the evening, which will be some scrap time. A lot of interesting conversations, a lot of predictions to go through into this one as well, because with the recent results, a lot of what we kind of have coming forward is going to potentially be group shaking overall. But are you ready to jump in? You ready to get some scrap time going on here, Mr. Vision?
Hell yes. I'm always ready, Alan. I love scrap time.
I feel like I really brought the energy up with that last segment. Let's keep it rolling.
Yeah, you did.
You mentioned it earlier. Clay on the rookies. What are your takes on maybe Clay finding his rings because his secret sauce has revealed that he's been using rookies to do it?
I mean, I guess in a way it's kind of true, right? Because he got some of the best players who have ever touched the game are now, with him on those rings and on those journeys. But I think that Clay is probably the best at being able to bring up and coming talent in and being able to teach them.
Without question. I'm glad we gave you a moment to do that, because that was a fun topic of platform. Hey, Miami Strike is being added. It's going to be very small, 6v6. Were you pumped about the new map variant, or what's your thoughts?
I want to see it. I want to play it first. A lot of buildings, but I'm willing to give it a try.
I'm excited for it. I think it's going to be pretty fast paced. I think it's going to feel like a more balanced nuke time, which is weird to say, but it's going to make the engagements not nearly as claustrophobic, even though there's a lot of buildings like you mentioned. Also coming in, 40-player hardpoint onto Golova. I don't know if you saw this or not. Huge open map that they're currently using on Outbreak. What are your thoughts on 40-player hardpoint? We joining up on that or what?
Oh yeah, I mean I'm always down for it, right? Like these different fun game modes, lots of players, send it, let's have fun, let's give it a go. I'm good for it.
You won't catch me a minute on that. No chance. I'm not gonna get sniped across the map anymore. I had enough of that in our regular Armada. Prediction time: New York, London. Who you got tomorrow?
I got New York. I think they're gonna take it 3-1.
I've also got this one 3-1. New York really showed me a lot today. That's kind of where I'm at. Yes, London has looked good. At a certain point, I have to stop doubting them. But overall, I think what this team has shown us so far is that they can compete, but maybe not necessarily at the very toppity top. Dallas, Minnesota. Who you got in this one later on?
I know Rocker came out hot and it was good, but I think that Chicago came out pretty flat, and I don't think the same's gonna happen to Dallas. Dallas is gonna take this one 3-1.
I don't know, man. I think looking at the maps that they like to play, there's potential that Minnesota can really upset here. I still think Dallas is going to take it, but I'm usually just using that off of the preferential treatment that Dallas gets. I think Minnesota can actually win this one, realistically. Chances of Florida doing what Minnesota did and upsetting Optic in the final day.
I don't see it. I think Optic is gonna kind of get back on track. They know they shouldn't have lost. They did, so they're gonna bounce back. They're gonna take this one. This very well could be a 3-0.
It better be a 3-0. That's all I'm gonna say. It better be a 3-0. Now, that said, I think Florida's got some stuff to prove, but it better be a 3-0 for Chicago. Otherwise, Twitter's gonna blow up. That brings us into some viewer questions, if you have any. Again, we kind of skipped over a number of results in favor of other topics for the day, so feel free to start laying them out there in the chat overall. We still have to do we still have like 3 giveaways that we have to do, by the way, for the CDL team packs. We need to do those at some point. We've got London, Minnesota, and Seattle.
Both teams are hot right now, London and Minnesota.
I think we save it for Sunday. We'll do it out on on socials this time around. And yeah, I think depending on who wins, maybe we'll choose that.
Who wins?
CDL
I like that.
Skin. That sounds like a good idea. Best rookie right now. I was waiting. I was hoping for this question. If you were to pick a rookie of the year right now, who are you picking?
Do you remember who I said when we saw the debut way back when against Optic? I don't know if you do, but I got DC right now.
Yeah, I figured you probably would. There's a big part of me that wants to say Diamond Con, but at the same point, I feel like as far as like most overall impact, I feel like Standy has the potential to really make the most impact overall in the CDL. With how Minnesota started versus what they could potentially do. Because we talked about how this Minnesota rocker is either going to be incredible or atrocious.
Yeah.
And they were atrocious. So if they become incredible because Standy is picked up and everyone starts playing better because of it, I think there's a conversation for Standy. It's just tough because we've only seen him play once.
Yeah, that's the thing. Like right now, like if we had to pick one, it's just so tough, obviously, because Standy's only played one match. And DC, I think, has brought it. Well, I should say like single-handedly, right? Because it's a collective effort, but was a massive part of why they got third, in that stage. So, I mean, yeah, right now I think it's DC for me. He's just been too good.
That would probably be my overall pick. One of the things that I'm worried about when it comes to like MVP and Rookie of the Year vote is like how much of a popularity contest it just becomes off of like who has the best brand overall, who's the most approachable rookie to pick.
How else would you do it? Like if it wasn't, because is it up to the fans?
I don't think it's up to fans. I think it's like a fan vote, but it's also weighted by CDL talent and staff as well. I think. I don't know. I think it should be merited off of it should be based off of merit first.
Yeah, sure.
I don't know. Who do you think the next AM would be that gets brought up to the CDL?
I mean, I think Saints is up there, right?
That would be my pick.
Like Saints, I think is the first one that you probably look at bringing on. Other than that, I think Yeezy's another good one too, or Yeez. I think I actually clarified that the other day with him because I wasn't sure because he used to go by Yeezy. Now it is Yeez. So I was talking to him in the DMs. He's like, it is Yeez now. So I'm like, okay, because I was calling him Yeezy while Brody was calling him Yeez in the cast. I'm like, this is what I know he's called. I don't know if he changed it, but yeah, Yeez I think would be probably maybe the other player that is potentially CDL ready with the right team and the right veteran behind him.
Now, Devonta just put it in chat. I was going to say Saints would have been my number 1. John would have been my number 2. And then Hydro would be my number 3. It just, the formula that is built as far as what people are expecting, I think also helps influence if they're going to get picked up or not. Like, there's enough of a buzz floating around about, who were, like, again, because we ask questions like this, and I feel like everyone is always going to have some sort of an answer. And if it starts to lean more into one player's camp, I feel like the probability of them actually getting picked up is pretty high. So I think Saints is up there in my mind. I think John's up there. Hydra's up there. Spart is in a weird position because right now he's being forced to essentially run and maybe not a main AR. Like, I think maybe Hydra, you can make an argument, is actually running main AR for Subliners Academy, since he's the one running the QBZ with an optic, and Spart is running the TAC Flak QBZ build. But I don't know. I feel like someone would have to be willing to take a chance again on somebody. Like, to go from being in the pro league to go back down to going right back up again, I feel like is pretty rare. Like, Zed is the only one who has really been able to do that in at least this year. So
yeah, Spart's in that tough position. Whenever, I mean, it's dangerous because it feels like whenever players get brought up to the CDL, and which was a tough spot for him because of LAG, and then they get sent back down, it's really difficult to get another shot again, right? So yeah, Sparta, I don't really know how I feel about, like, is it worth taking a shot? Probably, but like, there's so many other options as well that it could be difficult to give him a second opportunity.
Yeah.
But John's one I missed too. I forgot about John. I'd have John up there as well for as far as someone who would certainly be ready to be brought in.
Yeah, but if you watch the last show, he needs to win stage 2 before he's brought up, in my mind.
Oh, that's right. In Alan's mind.
Practical asks, does Minnesota keep this up, or are we going to see the typical roster change and the team flies high and then crashes back down? AKA, do you think Minnesota is just on a honeymoon period?
I think right now any team is. I think when they get a new roster change like this, like especially when you're rock bottom, because you only have room to go up, right? Like that's why I think London and Minnesota are in a honeymoon phase, because things have been going wrong for such a long time, specifically for London, that when you get a new player in, I feel like, you know what I mean? Like, it's just like vibes are back. It's like, all right, like this is our chance to start bringing it back. We're still early in the season. So I think that they absolutely are in this honeymoon phase. It's just a matter of, are you going to be able to still continuously grow throughout the rest of the season? And I want to say no for London, but I want to say yes for Minnesota.
Yeah, I think that the honeymoon phase is not really going to apply to Minnesota because there wasn't just one new player brought in. It's also a couple of role reversals and swaps that have happened that will allow them to be where they actually should be. Take a couple more. Quattro asks, has Dashy been caught in his own statement with his lackluster play of late with the QBZ? I don't know. I feel like there's a lot riding on Dashy. Like, people at the beginning of the year are like, hey, Dashy's going to be MVP this year. Like,
right.
That's a lot of weight. There's a lot of expectation that I think will always be in people's minds when it comes to evaluating how he's playing. He did not have a good performance for Minnesota at all. Played awfully. He didn't.
Yeah, it was a tough one. I think that comes back to the mindset of Dashy in particular, which I guess when I'm like almost talking about Optic, like wasn't like ready, didn't feel ready. Sure, that was like as a team, but I feel like Dashy's one of those players too. It's like tough, like you're one of the most insane players in the league, like mechanically,
right?
And getting to that level mentally for every single match, knowing you're playing a bottom tier team, maybe isn't easy. Not that I'm making excuses for Dashy, but I think that's where his headspace is at when he is prepping for these league matches.
That's a good point.
It's a different environment, but I think that, I mean, it certainly was lackluster, right? Like the QBZ, I don't think it's going to affect Dashy because it's like just like the XM4, and you saw what he did with the XM4. It's just a matter of like these guys taking things serious when it comes down to their games.
We'll finish this episode off with a lot of LAT considerations. The first coming from Traplord, with LAT currently looking at a loser's bracket seeding, which is true. They play Atlanta, then they play Toronto, the last two matches that they have available to them. What happens, or where do you see them finishing with stage 2? We'll put that question there first. Where do you have LAT finishing this year, or this stage rather?
I think top 8. I actually don't think that they placed too highly. I think Venom was a great pickup for them, but I think they need time. I think that team needs time, and just watching some of the behind the scenes content with 100 Thieves, it feels like these guys are going to be really good next stage, but I don't think things are going to come together for them in time this stage.
I agree. Group B is looking terrifying, by the way, with Minnesota now playing as well as they are. Paris still playing really well. Florida, who's 1-1, opportunity for them to still find a couple other wins. That's a terrifying bottom part of the group to go into if you are the bottom of Group A, which currently is the Thieves, the Ultra, and the Gorillas. That is not a comfortable matchup, I think, for any of them. I think top 8 is probably fair. I do see them improving to be in a position well enough to beat the first matchup overall, but I don't see them winning the second matchup in their lower bracket. I think they win one, and that's about it.
Yeah.
It just depends on who they play. It depends on what the matchup looks like.
It does. It really does.
But with that in mind, so pending, let's just go ahead and take Traplord's question and send it into Aaron's question. Let's say that the Thieves have an early exit. Do you think that that is the end of the Slasher, Kenny, and TJ trio?
I don't think so.
Not
this stage. No, not this stage. Maybe if next stage goes bad, yeah, maybe they'll make another swap. Actually, I bet they would make another swap, but I don't think so. It's kind of weird because those guys I feel like had to stick together because of the situation that happened in the offseason where they didn't know, like, was LET going to be a thing? Like, well, you know what I mean? Was 100 Thieves coming into the scene? Were they not? Like, was Optic Gaming going over? There was so many question marks that a lot of players actually turned it down because they didn't know what the hell was happening, and they couldn't get a lot of things confirmed for as far as their salary. So they just simply went other ways, and those guys were forced to stay together. So I don't think they're going to make a change, but yeah, if this stage or next stage rather goes really horrible, I think they would swap one out potentially.
I agree. It's just I don't see them making a change in that department. I think largely because Venom would have to really earn his keep, not just from a performance standpoint, but like chemistry wise, he would have to be like vibing harder with the other two than the third is. Like whether you're talking about like Kenny and Slasher, Venom is kind of replacing TJ. You know what I mean?
Sure.
Like he would have to not just replace Temp, he would have to replace somebody else as well. And I just don't see that happening. I don't know. I have a hard time feeling that 103 core 3 is going to change at all throughout the entire year. So maybe with that in mind, we'll just kind of wrap it with this last part of the question from Devantham. Is 100 Thieves, since they're essentially Slasher's team, is that going to potentially cost them a world championship? Tough question.
I mean, I don't think it's going to cost them.
Right now, they're not a world championship contender. So
they're not.
Whatever you want to attribute that to.
Yeah, I never count Slasher out at champs. And I mean, it's because he has 2 rings, both times not expected to win really those rings at the beginning of the year. Like if you look at Envy, I want to say at the beginning of the year, in like Black Ops 3, I think it was. Or it was IW, it was one of the two. I can't remember, or rather the one before that, AW. I can't think of which one it was, but Slasher like was not like looking like a contender for the end of the year when we got towards champs. So I'm just thinking like I just don't want to count Slasher out because I think TJ's looked really good at times, and so has Kenny, like championship like styles out of those guys.
Sure.
I think that can come back up, but yeah, I don't want to say it's going to cost them.
Yeah, I don't think it's, I mean, right now they're not a championship contending team, so it's kind of hard to sit there and say that they're going to be costed of a world championship because they're not in the forefront of a conversation of being a top 3 team right now, if maybe not even a top 4, if maybe not even a top 6 team right now. So I think it's kind of a difficult question to really put a pin in, but yeah, I feel like there is still room for this team to prove themselves as being at the top. I just feel like the culture of COD right now is way too heavily reliant on this team's not playing well, so change. That's it. Like, that's why I look at that LAG squad and sit there and say, like, the core 3 of Assault and Silly and App, like, are they really going to want to be in a position to make a change? I don't think so. And you really can't make a conversation point saying, like, oh, they're going to drop Vivid and pick somebody else up. Like, Vivid was the only reason that LAG team even exists in the first place. So I think that's the staple, like, between them and Seattle. They are 2 teams that I think, like, especially with the recent results from Seattle, they are going to be more resistant to making change and trying to iron stuff out. It just comes down to, do they think that the roster that they have can compete for a world championship by the end of the year? Tough evaluation to make.
It is.
Well, that brings us towards the end of the show. A good one. Not that we ever have bad ones, but a good one to be sure. Visions, what is like the matchup you're looking forward to the most in the next 2 days?
The next 2 days?
Yeah.
I want to see if Minnesota bring it again. Right, versus Dallas, right?
They've got
That's
Dallas,
got to be the one for me.
And they've got Seattle. That's all they have left.
Seattle, I think they're good on. I think they're good with Seattle.
We'll see.
I just think their front. I think their front line. I think their front line's gonna outdo Seattle, and I think Pristini again is hit or miss.
That's right.
But I think versus Dallas, I think that'll be a good one. I just think it's gonna be a barn burner.
The other one I've got my eye on. London, Atlanta. Can London back up
London, Atlanta.
the talk, the smack talk? Imagine they're the first team to take down Atlanta. That'd be wild. We're going to say farewell for now. We'll be back on Sunday. Do not miss it. We'll be live as soon as the CDL comes to a conclusion. But until that point, do not let your fuse fizzle out. So long.